Good morning, internets. It's Marcella, your favorite artsy truck driver. I am coming to you from Colorado Springs. I'm at my first stop, waiting to get unloaded. Actually, I'm waiting for my forklift driver to finish unloading the flatbed truck in front of me. Once he's unloaded and the rest of his load is secure, I'll be pulling forward and then they'll begin unloading me. So I thought I'll go ahead and record our next video on chapter 7 from Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. Chapter 7 is awesome. If you have done this program before and you just want a brief refresher and you only read one chapter, read chapter 7. It is full of rich nuggets of inspiration and insight that for someone who's done The Artist's Way before, I think it'll give you the motivation to get creating again. It's awesome. So chapter 7, recovering a sense of connection. There's 3 main points that Julia talks about. She talks about listening, and in that section she talks about how we're not so much the artist creating. She talks about how all of the ideas in the universe that want to be created and expressed, they already exist, but as artists we're really just the conduit. And that helps take the pressure off of creating something new and something beautiful, because we're not fully responsible for what we create. There are other forces that we're working with that support us in that process. And so she talks about that in the first section on listening. And if you like that section, I highly recommend Liz Gilbert's book, Big Magic. She talks about that a lot. And if you don't have Big Magic, but you have access to the internet, Liz has some great YouTube videos, 2 TED Talks about that topic of us being a creative conduit. The other topic that Julia talks about in chapter 7 is perfectionism. And this was my favorite part of this chapter. I could relate to it so much. In this section on perfectionism, she reminds us that in our art making, it's about the process. It's not so much about the end product, it's the process. And whatever it is that we're creating, we need to not hold it so precious and to just enjoy the process. And I needed that reminder, and it's so interesting to me reading this chapter, the section on perfectionism. I need this message a lot because reading it reminded me, I just heard this a couple weeks ago. I've been taking a paint pouring class with Pam Fortner over at Foothills Art Center in Golden, Colorado. And in the class, one of the other students, another artist, asked me of the work I was creating, which was my favorite paintings. And I told her, I said, I'm really drawn to these 2. They were the most fun to create. I love the color palette. I love the composition. And she said, well, what about these? I really like these. And I said, well, they're okay. And I realized that I was becoming too critical, and that artist bringing that to my attention and her really liking some of my other work as much, if not more than what I was claiming as my 2 favorite pieces. It was a good reminder for me that everything has a place. It doesn't all have to be perfect, and it doesn't all have to look the same. In fact, variety is what also makes it fun and rich and allows me to offer more to the people that collect my artwork. So I loved the section on perfectionism because it was a much needed reminder. And here comes my forklift driver. Let me see if he's got something to say to me. Nope, he's moving along, and I'm still waiting for that driver to secure his load. Lastly, there's a section in chapter 7 on risk, and here she talks about how we often are jealous of other artists that work in our medium, and we tend to compare ourselves to them. And she talks about like film students comparing their student films to instead of comparing their student films to George Lucas's student films, they compare their student films to his Star Wars franchise. And we need to, if we're going to make comparisons, which I don't really recommend, we need to compare apples to apples and not compare our early work to someone who's been doing what we do much longer. We can learn from them and we can gain inspiration from them, but when we start comparing ourselves to them and then we're cutting ourselves down and then we're like, well, why bother? That defeats the purpose of what we're here to do, and we're here to create new work. Hey, that truck driver is moving forward, so it's time for me to go. So that's chapter 7 in a nutshell. I'm now going to be moving on to chapter 8, recovering a sense of strength. And I'll be bringing that video to you next week, but I've got to go move my truck. So in the meantime, until I record the next video, live creatively and give yourself permission to create bad art, because bad art's better than no art, all right? And you'll get better at your craft. Talk to you next time.